Asian elephant. In the fierce Second Punic War, the legendary general Hannibal Barca unleashed upon his enemies one of the most terrifying weapons the ancient world had ever seen: war elephants. These were not ordinary animals. They were gigantic beasts turned into living machines of war, capable of spreading terror even before the battle began. Imagine the moment. The soldiers of the Roman Republic formed their lines of shields and spears, expecting to face another human army. But suddenly, in the distance, a strange sound began to rise. Heavy footsteps that made the earth tremble. The ground shook. The air filled with the blaring of animal trumpets and the shouts of their handlers. Then they appeared, massive elephants advancing toward the battlefield. A war elephant could weigh between 4 and 5 tons. It was a living mountain. Its towering height dominated the battlefield, and its strength was capable of crushing men and horses as if they were nothing more than dry branches. When these creatures began to charge, the impact was devastating. Lines of soldiers trained to withstand swords and spears were not prepared to stop a wall of muscle and flesh rushing straight at them. But Hannibal did not send them alone. The elephants were equipped for war. In some cases, they wore leather armor or protective headgear, and on their backs, platforms were placed where warriors hurled javelins and fired arrows at the enemy from an elevated position. From that height, fighters could attack with deadly advantage while the massive beast pushed forward through confusion and chaos. The elephants themselves were weapons. Their tusks could pierce shields and shove soldiers aside, and their powerful trunks could grab, throw, or smash anyone who got too close. But the most terrifying moment came when the charge reached the enemy line. With thousands of pounds crashing into them, many soldiers were knocked down and trampled, while the animal kept moving forward through screams, dust, and panic. The true power of the elephants was not only physical, it was psychological. Many Roman soldiers had never seen an elephant in their lives. Before them suddenly stood an enormous creature with tusks, thunderous calls, and a presence that seemed pulled straight from a nightmare. Horses panicked instantly. Some refused to advance. Others fled in terror before the fighting even began. The result was a battlefield filled with fear. Formations broke apart. Soldiers watched in horror as these gigantic creatures advanced relentlessly. The fame of Hannibal's elephants became even more legendary when the general carried out an almost impossible feat, crossing the Alps with his army to invade Italy. Along with soldiers, horses, and supplies, he also brought elephants through icy mountains and narrow paths, something that seemed completely impossible. Many died during the brutal journey, but the survivors appeared in Italy like monsters of war, spreading shock and terror. The elephants of Hannibal Barca were not merely animals in battle. They were living symbols of power, fear, and destruction, giants that transformed the battlefield into a spectacle of raw, overwhelming force that the ancient world would never forget. Horned viper, Hannibal deeply hated Rome. He had sworn to fight it until the last day of his life. So he ordered his men to gather snakes from the mountains. They collected the Ottoman viper, a dangerous venomous snake, and the horned viper, which is even more venomous. Its bite is powerful enough to kill a lion with a single strike. There were also non-venomous snakes, but they all served Hannibal's purpose: to launch them in clay jars at enemy ships and spread pure panic. He could hardly imagine a greater satisfaction than watching his enemies run in terror, throwing themselves overboard to escape a deadly snake. Even worse for them if it was a horned viper, because the symptoms are brutal and the death can be slow and agonizing. A horned viper's bite is horrific from the very first second. It feels like being stabbed with red-hot metal. The wound swells rapidly, as if it's about to burst from the pressure. A crushing pain builds. Tingling spreads through the body. The skin darkens. Severe nausea and dizziness make it hard to stand. Cold sweat covers you. Your heart begins to beat irregularly. Meanwhile, the venom destroys tissue and spreads through the bloodstream, causing internal bleeding, blurred vision, and finally collapse in a painful, tragic end. All of this was part of Hannibal's design. The fleet of Pergamon was stronger and more disciplined. He couldn't defeat them with force. He had to break their minds, and the snakes were perfect for that. When the enemy ships appeared, he asked which vessel carried King Eumenes II, his rival. He wanted the jars to land especially on that ship, right among the rowers, so they would drop their oars and leave the vessel helpless. It was pure psychological warfare. The snakes were sealed inside clay jars and launched by catapult. The jars shattered on deck. Snakes scattered everywhere. Panic erupted. The sailors lost focus. Formation collapsed. Eumenes ordered the fleet to retreat. It was one more victory for Hannibal, the master of the snakes. See you next time.